Hi everyone, hope you enjoyed the holiday break. Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to the new Vision Mobile webinar. I'm Matos, the Developer Economics Senior Program Manager, and I'd like to introduce today's webinar on developer programs. We'll be presenting key facts and insights from our newly released Developer Programs Benchmarking Report, which is based on our survey of over 13,000 developers. Before we get started, I'd like to make a brief intro to Vision Mobile for anyone who's not familiar with us. We are a leading analyst company in the developer economy, reaching and engaging thousands of developers through our Developer Economics Research Program. Our research tracks the latest developer trends and helps clients like Google, Intel, and Microsoft predict where the market is headed next. Our surveys reach developers across the globe and across mobile, IoT, desktop, as well as cloud. Today we have Bill Ray with us, our Senior Business Analyst at Vision Mobile, and also the author of the Developer Programs Benchmarking Report. Bill has been in the industry for many years and has in-depth knowledge of both the mobile and IoT sectors. The presentation today is going to run for around 30 minutes, and then we'll have a brief Q&A sessions with questions from the audience, so be sure to stick around. You can write your questions on the chat window of the control panel. We'll address as many as we can in the session, and we'll respond to the rest through email. We'll be recording the webinar today and sending the recording to all participants. So let's get this webinar started. Bill, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I know people are coming from different time zones, but I'm in the afternoon. So thanks for coming along, and let's talk about developer programs. We started off trying to work out what a developer program was. One of the problems we had was actually defining it, because ultimately it starts off as a website where people can download stuff and documentation and APIs and so forth. But a modern developer program is a great deal more than that. If we look at something like the Google Android developer program, it comes right down to the Android store and in-app billing and all that sort of stuff. So the program has become a collection, a broad collection of things, which is unequal. Some companies don't offer some services, some companies offer a lot of different services. So it's a jigsaw puzzle of sample code, courses, marketing, tech support, documents, events, and so forth, all of which comes together to produce a developer support program or a developer program. When we compared the developer programs, we had to allow for that. We had to allow for the fact that some companies were not providing the full range of services, and some were providing some quite unusual services. And so we tried to allow for that in our analysis. So on with the actual data, is what I think you're more interested in. Starting with mobile developers, we found was that almost 90% of mobile developers are using Google Developer Program. That's not terribly surprising. The sort of complete domination was a little bit surprising, but not terribly. Google, of course, is not the owner, but is the backer, is the drives the Android standard, and certainly runs it. And anyone developing for Android, pretty much anyone developing for Android, will be going to the Google support site. So we weren't surprised to see that 90% of mobile developers making regular use of that support. Facebook and Twitter ranked surprisingly high. They obviously don't have a device platform, but still very popular. Samsung is an interesting one. We'll see on the chart. In fact, if I go to the chart, I can show you that. Here's the chart, and you can see Samsung. There's 15, but we only showed a few here just for this webinar. But you can see Samsung there at the bottom. And one of the interesting things about Samsung is they are trying to hang on to Android developers. So, for example, if you are developing applications for a Sony handset and you go to the Sony website, there you'll find support for particular Sony extensions or features of their handsets. But you'll also find pointing you to go to Google, get the Android kit from there because we make Android phones. You go to the Samsung site and you don't. What you find is a full Samsung developer program. They recommend Eclipse rather than Android Studio. And they are still hoping to hang on to the Android developers. And that's interesting because it's Samsung trying to maintain ownership of the entire value chain, which is very much part of their company philosophy. But what we see when we look at the results is it's not been terribly successful. And Samsung devices, of course, are very successful Android devices, but the developer program is not being used anything like what you'd expect if it were reflecting the proportion of devices in the market. So that was our first thing. Our next interesting thing we found was that developers trust third-party sites more than vendor forums. I want to take a minute to explain what we mean. The developers often seek peer support. They're looking for help from people who are in the same situation as they are. And almost all the developer programs provide some sort of website or community area where developers can help each other and lend support and ask questions and so forth. But what we found was that developers actually value far more the support sites run by third parties. Now I'm talking about sites like Stack Overflow and Cura and Instructable, where developers can actually go and ask questions or post information about problems they've solved and become involved in the community, but not run by the platform owners such as Google and Amazon and so forth. So it's interesting to note, and we'll see in a moment, that the 4 developer programs who ranked highest for their engagement with these third-party sites, with Stack Overflow and so forth, were the same 4 developer programs who ranked highest overall. They were the most popular, and the third-party engagement was a massive feature there. Why do people like that so much? Why do developers go to these third-party sites? Well, there's really 2 reasons. Firstly, a lot of developers are working on applications which run across more than one platform. So if you're creating an Android application which integrates with an Amazon Elastic Cloud, then what you're looking for is support on both of those platforms. The feeling is you're going to get better support from a third party. You're more likely to bump into a developer who has hit the same problems, who is working on the same combination on a third-party site than you are on a site run either by Amazon or Google. There's also a feeling, not necessarily accurate, but a feeling that the sites run by the platform owners, such as Google and Amazon, will be less critical of their products, that they may shy away from pointing out flaws in those products and so forth. In reality, we've seen no evidence for that, but there seems to be a feeling that those sites will be less impartial. So what we see is companies that have been actively engaging in those sites are paying people. They have staff whose job it is to go onto places like Stack Overflow, answer questions about their products, and help developers through that mechanism. And that seems to be a very popular thing. Samsung and Amazon not doing quite so well. I think if we look at the chart, we've only got the top 4 there, but you can get an idea of the numbers. Most of the numbers have been removed, but you can see the good ratings there. And average out of 4, the overall average being 2.28. So if we take the whole 15 developer programs, those are the top 4. The rest will lower than that. So a very high level of engagement. But most importantly, I think, is that fact that these Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Mozilla will rate it top overall. And so those who engage most with third parties are those which are most popular at the end of the day. And it is every day. And this was a bit of a surprise, certainly to me. I've been a software developer in my time, and I use developer programs in my time a great deal, but not every day. What we found was nearly half of developers are visiting a developer program every single day. Now, it seems unlikely they're seeking solutions to problems. It's possible maybe they're just desperately looking for solutions, or maybe they're working terribly, terribly hard and thus hitting a lot of problems. But what's more likely here is that they are visiting the developer program as a community, not as a solution to a problem or to download a particular piece of information. And what they're doing is they're visiting the site, they are reading other people's problems, they are learning more about the platform on which they work, as a leisure activity, but also as a contribution to their work. And they are also finding people who may have hit similar problems or problems they haven't hit yet, and adding to their knowledge. They're also answering questions, of course. A lot of these are peer support sites, and it's a very popular thing, as we just said. So we've got half of developers who are using a developer program every single day, either as a resource user or as a community member. Mobile developers are particularly keen on being daily visitors. Those who develop applications for Android or iOS are the ones who are really hanging around the developer sites, the support sites, and interacting with the developer programs. And in part, of course, that's the maturity of the mobile ecosystem. We've already seen in our State of the Nation that mobile developers tend to be a little bit younger, and there's a lot of innovative work going on, and the platform is relatively mature. Mobile gold seekers are using developer programs the most for inspiration as well as support. Now, I should probably explain what a mobile gold seeker is if you're not familiar with Vision Mobile and how we divide up our survey subjects. So what we have is an outcome-based segmentation model, which divides up the developers into 8 segments, looking at what they intend to achieve through their development rather than income or demographic or regional areas. So we have the hobbyists who are, we have the self-improvers at the top, and they're hobbyists who are just doing it for fun, they're just having a laugh, creativity, creating stuff for themselves. Explorers, who are slightly different because they have a definite aim in mind, they're building their skills, they're trying to get involved, they're trying to explore new technologies in new areas. Then we have hunters. Well, then we have the those who are going to make revenue from the app economy. We have the hunters, who are experienced developers who are trying to build a business based on their development, who are creating new applications and so forth. And of course, guns for hire, who are the contractors, who are a very important part, have always been a very important part of the software industry, and they are under contract there for sale to the highest bidder. Then we have extending a business, the product extenders who are existing products which they may be porting to a new platform and so forth, digital content publishers who are more interested in getting their content out there, enterprise IT, obviously it's self-explanatory, and the gold seekers, which oddly enough is something we mentioned a moment ago, which is the mobile startups aiming to hit VC gold. So these are the companies who are looking for something interesting to do and intending to make money through some great innovation. The next Angry Birds, or Flappy Bird, I guess. So if we look at those segments and how often they use our support programs, again, we've taken the numbers off this for this presentation, but hopefully there's enough information for you to compare there. And we can see that we split up the mobile developers, which are in blue, and the desktop developers in mauve. I guess that's mauve, and maroon. Maybe it's maroon. Anyway, either way, so you can see there, hopefully, that the gold seekers are the greatest users, certainly the greatest daily users of support programs, developer support programs across desktop and mobile. They're a league ahead of everyone else, and they're very keen on using it often. Now, for gold seekers, of course, they're looking for solutions to problems just like everyone else, but they're also hanging out, looking at the environment, looking at what might be missing in a platform or a service, and so there's an opportunity there. We can see the big disparity if we go across to the hunters, which is on the left-hand side, 3 in. We can see that mobile hunters, particularly using the support programs, again, weekly rather than daily, but I think what we see there is a lot of hanging out, looking for opportunities, looking for things that might be interesting. So we can see that not a massive amount of variation. We can see that the enterprise IT are not using it quite so much, and that the gold seekers and the guns for hire and hunters are the big users of support programs, develop programs on a day-to-day basis. If we break that data down by region, we get some slightly interesting results, or actually more interesting results. We see in Europe the highest weekly use. People, developers in Europe are using support programs every week, but very low for daily use. So we seem to be a Europe people who kind of drop by every once a week or whenever we have a problem or whenever we're bored. Asia, you find very low rates for weekly use, but a very high rates for daily use. And that's very interesting because what we're seeing there is a demographic split. We've got developers, a group of developers who are keenly using their support programs every day, who are part of that community, who are contributing to it, and are helping to build the platform and make the platform more useful. And then we have a completely different group who are visiting every few months or every few weeks, who are just solving a problem, visiting for a reason. Europe and North America, high rate of weekly use, as I said, low rates for daily use, because the vast majority of developers are using the program every week, but not every day. And if we look at that on the chart, again, we can see the average for weekly, daily or weekly is 62%, daily is 44%, very high. Mobile, it's even higher than that, but this is across mobile and desktop and cloud and everything. But we can see that the daily use is very high in Eastern Europe, in Middle East and Africa. Those are the places where they're really making use of these programs very heavily. South Asia, as I mentioned. In Europe, on the left-hand side there, Western Europe and Israel, we can see that the daily use is really quite low. Oceania as well, which is Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. Very low daily use, very high weekly use. So these are people, they're actively involved, but they're not visiting the support program every day. And that was very interesting. To be honest, the frequency of daily visits was quite a surprise, and the way in which people use support programs and become part of the community, and the proportion that are doing that was interesting. So when we looked at why people are visiting, and we looked at the frequency with which people visit different sites, we came up with this model of a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And the concept here is that people visit support programs for different purposes. Starting off with a reason, when you're writing some code and hits a problem and needs to find a solution to that problem, you go to the developer support site, you find the solution, and that's it, you're gone. And you're visiting for a reason. And a lot of support sites, that's fine, that's what you're doing. I mentioned earlier, you may be going for a season to Twitter, where you're working on a project which integrates with Twitter. So we see a lot of developers who are visiting Twitter for a season, and they'll be doing that for a few months very often and then dropping off after that. But then we have developers who visit for a lifetime. And there are some platforms, like the Android platform, where the amount of work on that platform is such that a developer will actually come to identify themselves. You know, people will say, I am an Android programmer, I am a Elastic Cloud programmer, and those people are signed up for a lifetime. The lifetime of the technology, perhaps, rather than their own lifetime. Things move very quickly. But they're signed up for a lifetime, and they'll be there a lot. And so we have these reason, this season, and a lifetime. And if we look at that, we see that half of those who use Google's program are visiting every day. So a lot of developers, like 47%, I think it's on the next slide, of those who visit Google come every day, which is a huge proportion. And for Google, that's very, very powerful, because that means that they can use that developer program to reach out to those developers, to keep them updated, to recruit them to new projects and purposes through the developer program. So there's a great communication channel there where you've got people back every day. Facebook and Twitter, daily destinations for many, but a lot of 3-month visits. And as we talked about, this is the attending for the duration of a social season of a project, sorry, duration of a social project, a season. If we go down to the lower half of the chart, we'll see Amazon, Intel, Yahoo, and Samsung. These are reason destinations where someone has a problem and they go to solve that problem. We've only got the very top of the chart here, but you can see that Google, 47% of those who visit Google are coming every day. A third of those who visit Microsoft are coming every day. So these are really community sites. Facebook, again, very high. We see more of a disparity there. As in, we see, if you look at the right-hand side, we see a lot of people visit Facebook every day, a lot of people visiting every quarter. And that's because these are seasonal visitors, and we happen to catch when the sample was done, survey was done, they were working on a project involving Facebook or Twitter. So we see these as seasonal visitors. If we go on to why they're visiting, what they're getting when they get there, we asked developers what they valued, what they wanted out of the developer program. We asked them each to name 3 things, the 3 most important things that you should find on a developer site. And like I said, the stuff that people offer is so broad. There's a huge number. We asked for 3 particularly because we kind of knew that documentation and sample code would be the top 2, and sure enough, that's what everyone wants. I mean, 70% of developers put documentation and sample code in the top 3 they wanted from the developer support side, developer support program, and that's not surprising. We all that's what we need to work. But if we start to look at those other options, as I said, we see at third-party sites much more important than official channels. One of the surprises was events. People didn't really like events at all. They rated really, really low. And the feeling was really that those are the bloggers and journalists. That's great for promoting your technology or launching a new version or you know, adding new customers. But really, for developers, not really interested in events. I think that developing is still ultimately writing software. Extreme programming aside, writing software is a fairly solo activity. And those who write software are not always the best at live events, really often happiest. I don't want to be too stereotypical about it, but social events aren't always ideal. So if we look at that chart, this is quite a long chart, and I have to say events dropped quite a long way down, but we can see what was popular. I mentioned documentation of sample code, way more popular than everything else. IDE integration, very important days when people are working on so many different platforms. So you want to be able to use a single IDE if I'm creating code that's going to run across several different devices. We talked about popular support channels, I mentioned before, very important. But also dedicated forums worth having, and training was also considered important. If we take that data and split it across our segmentation model, we can see what matters to whom. And here we can see that hunters care more for revenue opportunities, explorers care for training. So that's not terribly surprising. Guns for hire, contract employees care most for sample code and IDE integration, which again is not terribly surprising. We all copy and paste in this business, and guns for hire obviously do it as much as anyone else. So sample code is very important. IDE integration is a very important factor, again, if you're working across different platforms. The other thing with guns for hire is that they might be developing for one platform 1 month, a different contract, and they'll have to develop for a completely different platform. What they really want is to use the same tools, the tools they're familiar with. They don't want to have to go through a learning curve every time they change customers, so IDE integration is really important with them. If we look at training, it's hobbyists and explorers who really training. They want to get up to speed on new platforms. They want to explore and learn. And we've got a chart on this. I'm afraid there's no numbers on this one. We do have one with numbers on in the report, but this particular one, it's a heat chart. But you can still see, hopefully, the averages. So we can see that training, guns and hire, product standards. Guns and hire are not interested in training at all. They don't have time to attend training courses. They just want to get on and earn some money. We can see hobbyists and explorers really valuing training. Documentation, popular across the board, but most popular with gold seekers as it happens. Dedicated forums. Hobbyists, let me see, a hobbyist will take an interest in, they'll decide they want to create an application that uses Chrome OS or something, and so what they want is a dedicated forum for Chrome OS because that's what they're exploring. Whereas someone else might be more interested in creating a Chrome OS application that uses I don't know, IBM Informix or whatever, and what they want is a multi-platform support mechanism, as discussed. Direct revenue opportunities, no great surprises there. Enterprise IT aren't interested in it. Gold seekers are directly most interested in it. And of course, direct revenue opportunities, what we're talking about there is things like the App Store, which is available for Android and iOS and so on the mobile platforms. And it's becoming more popular. We now see it on the desktop, and it's extending. So we can see a little bit about which segments value different areas. Moving on, Chinese developers aren't impressing Chinese developer programs aren't impressing Chinese developers. It's an interesting thing, and if we look at the figures, we see that in East Asia, they're heavy users of developer programs. We know that they like developer programs. But if we look at the big Asian companies, Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba, all rated very, very poorly, scored very low on our chart. And what we see is that in China in particular, there of course is no Google, no Twitter, no Facebook. Those companies have not taken part in the Chinese companies are required to self-censor. They're required to control their content, and those companies, Twitter, Google, and Facebook, have refused to take part in that. And as a result, they don't work or work very poorly there. So Chinese developers, you'd have thought that would be the opportunity for Tencent, Baidu, and Alibaba to move in as they have on the business models. Certainly, those companies have been very successful in emulating the success of similar companies in the West, but they've not provided the same developer programs. And so Chinese developers form a much more fragmented community. There's more peer learning, fewer company-run programs, and more interaction between them. And that makes quite a different environment. If we look at our chart, we can see that in the figures, we've cut the middle out of this one, and again, taken the numbers off, but you can see Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook there at the top, rated very, very well, lots of excellence. Right at the bottom of the chart, there's a dotted line there, represents the missing 8, and then we've got Alibaba, Baidu, AT&T, Yandex, and Tencent right down the bottom there, not scoring very well at all. So it seems strange that none of the Chinese companies, or the South Asian companies, East Asian companies, managed to score better. You can see the averages there on the right out of 4. Hopefully giving some indication. Now, we broke down the popularity of each platform. When they voted, we asked whether platforms were good at particular things, whether they were good at paid support, whether they were good at ID integration and so forth, and got some results on that. It wasn't quite as interesting as we might have hoped. What we found was that the developer programs that were good were really good at everything, and developer programs that were bad were really quite bad at everything, which it would have been nice to have some more variation, but there you go, that's why we do this research. Google's only weak spot was paid support. It's very hard, or developers didn't feel they could pay Google to support them. Microsoft's weakness was direct revenue opportunities, which bodes badly for the Windows Store. And we've got a few anomalies. I'll show you the chart here. Here you can see the green, obviously, 10% above average, the red being bad. And we can see on the left-hand side, Google good at everything except paid support, and even reasonably good at that. Microsoft just good at everything. Apple pretty good at everything, not very good at mailing lists. The weird ones we get are Samsung, who you can see on the second from the right there, suddenly really good at mailing lists. And when time allows, we will have to go and have a look and find out why Samsung is so good at doing mailing lists, because they do seem to be. Offering very good paid support as well, which is something the others might like to take a look at. So we can see that if developers' programs are good, they tend to be good at everything. Mozilla is the only one not offering paid support or very good ID integration, but elsewhere doing very well. So if we actually come to the basic ranking, who was the best developed program? Now we had to take this, and we had to take the votes and well, not the votes, but the ratings for each program, of each area of each program, and we cross-referenced that with the importance of that. And when we take all of those things into account, we find that Microsoft is the most popular developer program. They offer the most popular services. Intel rates much higher than it ought to. We'll show this on the next chart, but one of the interesting things about Intel is delivering on the things that developers care about, including dedicated forums, marketing support, obviously ID integration, source code, and documentation. That's taken as read. And in fact, if we look at Amazon, who are reasonably popular but didn't deliver very well on source code or ID integration, both of which are really important for developers. And they're down a few places. If we just take the raw numbers, they rate relatively high. But once we weigh the importance, this is the chart we end up with. And as you can see there, Microsoft just edging over Google right at the top there, followed by Google, followed by Apple, Mozilla a little bit lower, Intel, Facebook, Twitter, Samsung, Amazon, Yahoo. We dropped a few off the bottom there. But as you can see, there's quite a difference between the top performers and the lowest. There's even quite a difference in the first few. So there's a real opportunity for a lot of these companies to improve their performance, and hopefully the information we've talked about will give some indication of where those opportunities exist and how they can improve it. That is my half hour. Obviously, if you want to know more, you can delve deeper. We have a data board service. We have access to all our data, and of course the report itself comes with a lot more information. And I guess I will hand back to Matos, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here, Bill. Thanks. So thanks. I see there's a lot of questions already.
Oh, good.
So yeah, that's I guess that's good news. We have a lot of private ones and a lot of open ones. So I'm sure that we won't have time to get to all the questions, but I'll try to have as many as possible. So let's first start with what we show here. Many people perceive as mobile-centric, and they're wondering how this compares to IoT.
The mobile centricity, there is some mobile centricity in some of the data. We do divide out IoT, but a lot of the data actually refers to developers in general. And what we see, at a very high level, what we see is a very similar thing in IoT developers. We're actually preparing a report, I think, at the moment on IoT, in particular, on IoT developer programs. One of the interesting things, of course, is that a lot of device manufacturers in Internet of Things are desperately recruiting developers. There's a huge competition to try and make applications easy to develop, because there's a huge feeling that if you can get the applications, then you will have a winning platform. We see this not only with actual devices, but also with platforms like Google's Thread and communication platforms and services such as AllJoin. These are hugely competitive, so we see a lot of resources being spent to create really nice developer programs. What we're not seeing yet is this sort of evolution of those into support on third-party forums and stuff like that.
Thanks, Bill. We then have some questions around comparing developer programs to third-party sites, for example, Stack Overflow or Quora, or even how developers feel about other content like newsletters, blogs, and social media. A lot of this information is available on the full report, of course, but if you can just give us some indication.
Yeah, social media didn't rate very highly. Really, the Stack Overflow and Quora, as I mentioned, rated really highly. People really liked those. The other communication things, newsletters were on our list, and they were pretty low. Email was pretty low. We didn't single out individual social networks, so I can't really go further than that. And of course, we were talking about support programs, not information programs. So if developers want to get information about new software or new releases, then that's more of a sort of broadcast forum. And in that would be a different subject. Where they get their information from, we can't be certain of.
Thanks, Bill. We then have some questions on localization, so the importance of having the content of developer programs in the local language. I don't know if you have any insights on that.
That's an interesting question. It's not a question we asked, I have to say. We work, obviously, our readers, those who respond to the survey, come from a lot of different countries and respond to our survey in a lot of different languages. Whether supporting material, whether there's value in translating supporting material, I don't think we can offer any great insight. We do know the language used by developers in different countries, and we know that developers work in sorry, I was thinking about this through, work in a lot of different languages. Of course, most development material is in English because the languages themselves are largely in English. So obviously that's a dominant thing. So no, I'm afraid I can't offer any great insight on that one.
Thanks, Bill. Just going through the questions here. There's a question about whether we're planning to research data science programs, and that's definitely something interesting for the future that has been discussed within the team. No solid response right now. Another interesting one is basically a simple one. How can a developer program make money?
That's a question we did address, and of course, historically, developer programs were profit centers. You go back to the Microsoft Certified Developer Program, and people paid to be a member of that, and it was a money-making opportunity. The ways in which developer programs make money now is through sold training. So developer programs can provide access to paid-for training. And in fact, as we said, that's quite popular with certain segments of the developer community. The other opportunity, of course, is events, but really we didn't find amongst developers, that can maybe be a money-making opportunity, but it's not really a great opportunity to communicate with developers or recruit them. It wasn't something they valued particularly. So really, it's training courses, paid support, so actually providing short-term support if somebody hits a particular problem, provide staff who can answer that, was another area. And it's interesting that the companies that didn't provide that, actually it did knock them down in the ratings. So people do value, they don't necessarily want to use it, but they want to know it's there. They want to know that if they do hit an immovable object, they can hire an irresistible force from the company to be able to fix it.
There's another interesting question, which I think is food for thought. So there's a question about if events are so have a low ranking in the survey, why are there so many developer events? And I would include hackathons in that, since it's been a trend for many years now, and I think lots of people are trying to use these types of events to basically boost developer interest.
I'll come back to hackathons if I may. So starting with events, of course, there's a couple of reasons. They're hugely useful for promotional. They get the journalists there, and I was a journalist for 8 years, so I was a tech journalist for many years, and I went to a lot of events, and I have to say they're quite fun. They ply you with free alcohol, and they take you out and tell you how marvelous their platform is, and it's all rather entertaining. So journalists love them; they think they're great. And there's a lot of value in that, and that goes for bloggers as well. If you look at the audience at the Microsoft events recently, it's bloggers. They're not even paid to be there; they're just there for the fun of it. So really, the events are appealing to a distinct group, and they're getting publicity. And that publicity may, a developer may see that written up on a website and think, oh, that's a technology I should look at. But directly, developers really didn't value them at all. Hackathons are an interesting one. We didn't divide them out, and it's a very, very different environment because you are encouraging people to come together and actually write code during the event. Now, I've attended quite a few hackathons, and I have to say I've very much enjoyed them, and they are a very different event. I don't think there have been enough of them, and they have been large enough for us to yet really estimate their value. They are getting more popular and they are growing. They're often seen as a way to introduce people to a new technology. But particularly, it's nice when we see themed ones. I went to one or two aimed around NFC, near field communications, where the task was to create an application that just did something interesting with NFC. And those are great fun, and those have been very successful. But not necessarily at promoting a particular API or developer program, but just promoting a technology. So I think they're not quite doing the same thing, and I think they will find their place, and I think there is value to them.
A question related to that is if events are not so effective, which perhaps are the best methods for recruiting developers. I think we touched upon that, but I think we can come back to the point.
Yeah, I mean, if I was trying to recruit developers, the key thing is the getting the first application running as quickly as possible. If you've got a new platform, a new API, then the Hello World application, the tool chain building, as familiar and as quick as possible. I spend a great deal of time on that. If you look particularly at the IoT, the successful IoT development platforms, they're the ones that have really made it so that there's a step-by-step guide to getting your first application up and running, and I think that's what people really want. And developers want to have a smooth transition between platforms. After that, keeping as much of what they know as possible. That's why we see IDE integration rated so highly. So if I've used Visual Studio for the last 20 years, and you say to me, here's my new Internet of Things object, you need to program it using CodeWarrior. I'm not even going to touch it because I want to use the IDE I'm familiar with, and so I want to use the tools I know. And I think that's really important. Developers want to be able to use the tools they already have.
Thanks, Bill. There's another one which I think is more of an opinion question for you rather than something that's based on data. So are there any suggestions to enhancing presence on third-party services, for example, Stack Overflow, rather than just other than just simply posting more?
You can pay them. I don't know about Stack Overflow, but if you look at Instructables, for example, Intel has a commercial arrangement with Instructables. Stack Overflow, I don't know their business model off the top of my head, but I imagine there are sponsorship opportunities. And certainly these companies are commercial operations. This isn't underhand or anything like that. These are places you can place advertisements and where you can provide co-sponsorship of events or promotional opportunities or sort of Ask Anything events. Reddit, of course, excels at those where you can get your lead designer in and get them to do a Reddit Ask Anything, and that will attract a lot of attention and get a lot of interest. And really can be quite a cost-effective way of reaching developers.
It's interesting. Building on a previous question, do we have? I think that's a matter of trust. That it's a very prominent place in our data, and the question is: are responses or content from companies or developer programs as respected as community content? So I think that's something that there's an indication on our data towards something.
There is an indication definitely towards those third-party sites, and I mentioned that earlier, certainly alluded to it, that developers do seem to have certainly they value the answers provided on a third-party site more than they value the answers provided on a platform-run forum. And as I said, it seems counterintuitive, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I think that there's a feeling that there's more, the third-party site will have less bias. Whether that's true or not, I've seen no evidence for that, but that's the feeling from the developers that we've spoken to, and certainly the figures do bear that out.
I think that's an indication to the previous question on to basically how can dev programs use third-party services. So what you
like
said about
get people to answer questions or approach them and give them money.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we have time for just another couple of questions. Are there examples where a developer program has made a product successful or unsuccessful?
Oh, we had a lot of discussion about this, and we did come up with examples. They were in the report, and I'm trying to remember them. We know that developer programs don't always work. Bada is an interesting one. The Samsung Bada platform came with a superb developer program and a free book and a very nice development environment, and failed appallingly, of course. Despite actually the first Bada phone, the Wave handset sold really quite well, but really developers weren't interested in creating applications which they saw as being under the sole control of Samsung. Bada was Samsung's attempt to emulate the Apple model, where the devices were entirely locked down and all applications had to be published by Samsung. And it was a valiant attempt, but not a successful one. So we know that that having a successful developer program will not necessarily lead you to a successful product. Conversely, and like I said, there are examples in the report, but I can't think of at the moment. But going back quite a long way, if you go way back to the Palm Pilot, the device, arguably the first successful personal data device, that had a superb developer program and was really took off by the third party. It was really a device that really demonstrated that third-party software could make or break a device. And that developer program, without a shadow of a doubt, and the community around that developer program really made the device successful. There's no way it would have been anything like as successful without that developer program around it and that huge number of applications that came out of the enthusiasm and the community feeling that developers for the Palm Pilot had. I should probably point out I was an early developer for the Palm Pilot, so I do have a little bit of bias there, but it certainly it was a successful product because there was a good developer program and very good support. So yes, there are examples.
So let me just ask a final one. So we talked about mobile-centric approach. We touched upon localization. Do we have any indication on the approach of enterprise versus hobbyist developer on this type of programs?
Definitely, we see the enterprise developers visiting developer programs less often. Hobbyists are forming part of the community and the freelancers. The enterprise developers seem to be more driven by problem solving. They're more season or reason visitors than they are lifetime or members of the community. So it does seem that perhaps they're more work focused, perhaps they're less interested in improving their own skills and abilities and more interested in just dealing with the problems that they have to hand.
Thank you, Bill. We have more questions, but I think we've run out of time, so we'll need to get back to everyone through email. So we should have everybody's email, and we'll, of course, send you a recording of this webinar. So let's stop here. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for sticking around and for all your questions. We really hope you enjoyed this, and please get back to us if you have any feedback or additional questions. You can reach Bill and myself at either bill@visionmobile.com or marcos@visionmobile.com. And of course, you can find out more about developer programs in the dedicated report, which is available on our website. So we'll be in touch for the next webinar, which will be in February. See you then. Bye.
Thanks very much indeed. Bye.